Hello again, friends! Claire, Kirby fan here, wrapping up another era of Kirby. And unlike the original era of games and the Return to Dreamland era, we can't call it the modern era anymore, thanks Forgotten Land, I always struggle with naming this one. In my video about the original era of Kirby, someone had described this as a bridge era, moving Kirby from the old style, trying weird ideas as HAL struggled to make an original game themselves, finally settling on Return to Dreamland. That's a great name, and I also like to think of this era as a midlife crisis of sorts for Kirby, as, aside from the remakes, none of the games from this time period had any sort of consistency. But, I mean, I'm not gonna go name this title anything weird like Reminiscing on Kirby's Midlife Crisis, or anything. Actually, that's hilarious. We're gonna go with that. So here we are again. As per usual, giving the video a like and a comment really helps me out, as does ringing the notification bell after subscribing. I normally spend more time on that, but going into this era of Kirby, there's one thing that I kind of neglected to mention. See, while Kirby's original run did end with Tilt and Tumble, you can't really say this run started with Nightmare in Dreamland. There's one major player that we need to talk about, even though it isn't a game, and that is... right back at ya. Okay, so I'm not here to talk about the quality of the show itself. I promise, one day you'll all know why I hate it so much, but what we have to talk about is how big of an impact it had on the games. Going from Kirby 64, which had Day-to-Day as a prominent playable character plastered all over the box art, or even Tilt and Tumble, a goofy spin-off whose plot revolved entirely around him, versus Meta Knight, who had only shown up in 2 of the 6 traditional platformers and a very small handful of spin-offs, one of which being the never-released-in-Japan game, Kirby's Avalanche. Then the anime happens, Nightmare comes out, and Day-to-Day is nowhere to be found on the box, or promotional material, or anything. Oh, but Meta Knight, right in the center of the box, drawing more attention than even Kirby. In the remake within a remake, yeah, think about that, Samurai Kirby even sees Kirby fighting Meta Knight last and not Day-to-Day. And I mean, that does make sense, since Samurai Kirby had Meta Knight be last in Superstar, but in Adventure, the game that is actually being remade, Quick Draw had Day-to-Day last, and surprise, Meta Knight is not even in it. Meta Nightmare is a post-game mode, but where is Day-to-Day's game mode? Nowhere in sight. Then, the very next game, Amazing Mirror, Meta Knight is the core of the plot, and Day-to-Day is not even in this game. To this day, it's the only one where he hasn't shown up at all. Squeak Squad was sorta better, but after a pathetic World 1 boss fight, Day-to-Day is never heard from again, while Meta Knight shows up partway through the game to try and save the day and stays relevant until the very end. Other games weren't quite as bad in this regard. Games like Air Ride and Canvas Curse put them on kinda equal footing, or at least close enough, while Mass Attack and Superstar Ultra actually leaned more towards Day-to-Day. Epic Yarn was probably the worst that it got, even including Amazing Mirror. Nothing would be better than what we got here, seeing how pathetic he is, but my own angry rambling aside, there was a major shift in focus with these games, but the most obvious ones were in regards to Day-to-Day and Meta Knight. Meta Knight was arguably more popular than Kirby, and it was all thanks to the anime. It also changed a lot about his character, but that's another tangent I'm sure you don't want to listen to, and I gotta save for the inevitable video on Right Back At Ya. The games themselves, though, also went through changes, most notably in terms of speed. This was definitely the fastest Kirby has ever felt, with no real exceptions. I guess running around in City Trial was kinda slow, but only because you're supposed to be riding on vehicles, or stars, rather than running around. But Nightmare in Dreamland, Amazing Mirror, Canvas Curse, Superstar Ultra, even Epic Yarn aren't games where Kirby casually walks around or has a slow run speed, or games where he attacks kinda awkwardly. With hardware becoming more advanced, things like the awkward controls of Superstar, the lack of adventure, or the slow pace of 64 in Dreamland 3 would never happen again. But what actually connects all of these games together? 3 of them share a similar visual style, but what else makes these games similar? Well, not much, to be honest. Outside of obvious things, like the fact that you play as Kirby, and even then, that's only for the most part, these are all really different kinds of games. Putting Nightmare and Ultra off to the side, since they're remakes, Amazing Mirror from the ground up is totally different from Canvas Curse, which is totally different from Epic Yarn, which is totally different from Air Ride, which is totally different from Squeak Squad, which is totally different from Mass Attack, etc. There's 2 ways to look at this. One, this was an era of creativity, surpassing even that of the original era. Or, this was a time when people had no idea what to do with Kirby, and it is very inconsistent. I like that a lot about this era though. You really get the feeling that the people making these games knew why Kirby was such a cool concept, and wanted to follow up in the footsteps of what came before. It even took the wilder ideas, mostly only seen in spin-offs, and applied them to the platformers. The world is made of yarn, you flit Kirby around, you draw the path for Kirby to move on, you explore a large open world, etc. And while I do love the craziness of the games in this era, I do wish that they connected to each other better. The Return era really fixed this, making things very consistent. See every game introduce and build on previous concepts while ditching others is definitely super fun. Meanwhile, the original run of games had a perfect balance. Sakurai helmed the action-packed games, Shimamura handled the slower collectible-focused ones, and then the spin-offs did their own thing. But here, aside from GBA visuals, none of the games really feel connected together, which I think led to a real indifference towards Kirby during the 2000s. The characters got to shine because of Smash Bros., but the games really floundered. The 3 most successful games being remakes and the 1 game that got proper marketing plus Western developer bias, sorry, I don't want to be mean to anybody, I'm just saying, is very telling. Still, despite that, there really is nothing like the run of games between Nightmare and Mass Attack. I wish the series did a bit better for itself in terms of sales and recognition, but having a stretch of 8 games that feel and play nothing alike while still being Kirby games is nothing to sneeze at. And yes, there were only 8 games during this time, but I can't think of any other series that has something like this. It feels so Kirby, and while I can give the run of games right after this credit for being consistent, I can't say they all feel as individual as these do. So again, it all comes down to preference. I won't lie, of the 3 eras that I'm covering for this series, this one is my least favorite, but I think that's a quantity issue more than anything else. Plus, you know, really high bar being set and all that. This video definitely felt very rambly, at least in the rating stage, but so did the last one I did. Don't forget to check that one out for my thoughts on Kirby's original run of games, or check out the individual videos I did for the main series ones. Playlists, what a great invention. Next time, we're heading to more familiar territory for a lot of you out there, and starting what fans called the Modern Era until Forgotten Lands started the now current Modern Era, so we're calling it the Return to Dreamland Era, or just the Return Era, which is really all you can call this next stretch of games moving forward. So where else do we start there? But with Return to Dreamland. Should be a good time, looking forward to seeing you for those videos, and until I see you again, bye!